Our fourth core value is the concept of kingdom advancement. We've already talked through prayer and its individual and corporate conversation with the Lord, fellowship, just the community that we're trying to build, and a community of celebration of each other's gifts, which is our third pillar or core value of humility. And now I want to talk about kingdom advancement. Now, this is possible because of the previous core value. So if you've noticed, there's been a progression, and there's been prayer that's become the bedrock and foundation, and its root in Scripture, but then also that corporate study of Scripture, which is fellowship and that enjoyment and doing life together. And through that, we discover each other's gifts and each other's strengths and celebrate them. And that's the concept of humility. And once we've discovered them, we're now able to commission them. And that's where we get to kingdom advancement. Now, a lot of times when we talk about kingdom advancement, we talk out of the Great Commission in Matthew 28, right? Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, and that's awesome. But here's the problem sometimes with that. When we hear that or when we speak about it, we've often misused the word discipleship and kind of subtly retranslated as converts, right? Make converts of all nations. But the Bible is very clear that it's disciple. Make disciples of people of all nations. Now, disciple, we have another word for it in English. It's the concept of apprentice or apprenticeship. So in way back when people worked with their hands a lot, and you were an iron worker, or you were a blacksmith, a carpenter, when you got to that rank, you would often bring in an apprentice, somebody younger, somebody who has maybe a little bit of classwork but not much in the way of field work, and you would train them. That means they would pretty much from day one start following you around. They would just be constantly on your tail. Everything you did, they would repeat. And slowly over time, you start explaining why you did things. Think of plumbing. First time you brought somebody in to fix a toilet or whatever. If your child was young, you probably just did it and didn't say anything. But as they got older, you started saying, now I'm going to replace this, or I'm going to I got to shut off the water valve before we work on this. And next thing you know, you're doing it together. You're doing it alongside of them. Then eventually they start to take the lead, and you're there to make sure they do it right. And then eventually it gets to the point where, hey, go fix this. I know you know how to do this. Now go. That's disciple making. Disciple making is taking somebody and basically having them follow you, be your shadow. Walk in your footsteps, the way you live your life, the way you study the word, the way you love your spouse, the way you raise your children, the things you're involved in the community, bringing them into that fold and into that story. And over time explaining more and more why you do what you do, the way you think and whatnot. Then starting to give them a little bit of responsibility, and you're starting to do it together, a shared activity. And then all of a sudden you start giving them the chance to lead and to run with things. And after a while, they can just handle it on their own. They no longer need you. But then it's their job now to go and grab somebody else and train them. And that allows you to do the same. And all of a sudden you go from one person doing it to eventually 4 people being able to do it, 8, 16, so on and so forth. That's the concept of multiplication. That's kingdom advancement. Making disciples who make disciples. So a better way of understanding the Great Commission, instead of saying, go therefore and make converts of all nations, but go therefore and make disciples who make disciples who make disciples who make disciples of all nations. Now, I don't want to separate the concept of conversion and meeting Jesus and discipleship. It's certainly there, but it's a season of discipleship. Discipleship comes from the moment you meet somebody to the moment we're standing in glory together. And obviously, at some point, if they do not know Jesus, you want to teach them about Jesus. But it's a season within a lifelong relationship. And hopefully, the Jesus you point them to is the real Jesus. And that they begin to start asking you questions. Why do you go to church? Why do you love your spouse the way that you do? Why do you prioritize your life the way you do? That's the moment we can begin to tell people about Jesus. And again, the Jesus we should be telling them about is the real Jesus, and that Jesus is infectious. He's so good, and he should be so real in our lives, we can't hold it in. We have to tell others. But again, it's done in the context of discipleship and relationship building. Ultimately, fellowship. Again, that's why the core values of our church go from prayer as a bedrock and study of Scripture, together as fellowship and building relationship, to discovering gifts, celebrating them, being able to point out, I see in you this, I see in you that, and ultimately advancing the kingdom. When we celebrate those gifts and we point people to the real Jesus, the church grows. It grows spiritually and it grows numerically. That is the goal with our church as we continue to grow and move as a movement. That again, every person we meet, we just begin to love and build a relationship with them, to disciple them, to show them the Christian worldview, and ultimately to show them Jesus and commission them to be a part of the ministry of advancing his kingdom.